We talked about in parts 1 and part 2 how there are two different worlds. And we talked about how Jesus operated in the world set by God that we should operate in. If we call ourselves being believers in God, true followers of Christ, we should be operating in that same world that Jesus not only operated in, but showed us how to operate in. There's no reason why we can't operate in that same world, but there are reasons why we don't operate in that same world. There's no reason why we can't, but there are reasons why I'll say most people don't. There's a reason why I never did until recently. That reason is, down through the years, church people or the church some kind of way started thinking, believing, and teaching that the only time you operate in that world is when there is a need to operate in that world. Now, what I mean by that is Jesus operated in that world a lot by the way he spoke. That's how we ended part 2, talking about the things that Jesus caused to happen simply by the way he spoke. Now, we can do the same thing simply by the way we speak. But if you think the only time you operate in that world, or the only time you operate by faith, or the only time you use your ability that God gave man is when there is a need, you're totally wrong. But that is what stops people from using their God-given abilities. Now, I know somebody disagrees, right? So, for those who disagree, answer this. Jesus turned water into wine by operating in the world set by God. What is the need for water to be turned into wine? Is that a life and death situation? No. So answer this. What is the need for a man to walk on water? What was the need for Peter to walk on water? Was that a life and death situation? No. Peter operated in that world because Peter wanted to operate in that world. Okay? You still don't believe? Answer this. Jesus taught us that if we speak to a mountain and tell that mountain to be removed and cast into the sea, he said it should obey us. What is the need for a mountain? And he was talking about a literal mountain that he pointed out to the disciples because he said, this mountain. What is the need for a mountain to be moved into the sea? There is none. That's still not good enough. Jesus spoke to a fig tree, if I'm not mistaken. And he told that fig tree not to produce fruit no more from that day on. And that fig tree withered up from the root up. What is the life and death situation of a fig tree not producing fruit. Jesus operated in that world that I'm telling us we can operate in, not because there was a dire need. He did it because he had the ability to do it. Now, when it came to raising the dead, healing the sick, opening blinded eyes, of course, that was a need. But after you have practiced, there we go again. We talked about before about practicing the principles in the Bible. Once you have practiced those principles on a fig tree, on walking on water, on speaking to a mountain, once you have practiced those principles on turning water into wine, then of course you can use those same principles, because you done got so good to now when it is a need, you can operate by faith because you're a believer. Instead of sitting up like most church folks do and not using their faith at all until a situation rises where they got to have faith, they got to trust God, and now they can't do it for what is needed because they have never practiced the principles of faith. They have never spoken to things and saw the results that your words that you speak can have on things out here. And because they haven't practiced it, they can't use it. That's what I'm trying to say. There is a world that we should be operating in where we speak things and we see the results. Not because it's a need, but because we have the desire to. Peter had the desire to walk on water, not the need to walk on water. Jesus had the desire to turn water into wine, not a need to turn water into wine. There's not a need to speak to a mountain. That might be a little bit too much to deal with for some of y'all right now. So I don't even know how long that was, but I'm just going to let that sit. Think about that. Think about that. And maybe in a couple of days I'll come back and add to it, because it's a lot more. But think about that. Use your faith now on things that you desire to use your faith on. Don't wait until there's a need to operate in the world that God meant for us to operate in all along. I'm telling you it works. I'm going to prove it later, but it ain't time for that right now. I'm going to prove it, but I'm telling you it works.